Okay, so Sean's heard this before, but I'll pitch you anyway. All right. So INFARM is a vertical farming company, and it's pretty much present food now, other than future food. A few years ago, it was future food. Today, it's present food. The pitch to you would be, what can we do to scale this faster, bigger, and to help the technology of vertical farming, which is now well documented and well established, to adopt and adapt into the global south. That's really what we're looking to do. And our range of products is moving very quickly from where we started out with leafy greens and herbs and microgreens to tomatoes. And today our lead geneticist here announced our first successful experiment on wheat grown indoors by any company for the first time. So how can we take this in the battle for food security and nutritional security further together?
Thank you, Suds. Lee?
Hi, so I'm Lee Recht, Vice President of Sustainability at Aleph Farm, the cultivated meat company. We grow cultivated beef steaks. So essentially we use the same building block of conventional beef production, the cell, but this time we do it outside of the animal, and we do it in a much more I would say a much more controlled environment that allows us to significantly reduce our environmental impact and also take care of climate action, public health, resiliency in food systems, of course, food security. I know Sean very well as well. We're part of the Innovator Globals of WEF, and we believe that the World Economic Forum is doing wonderful things for startups like us.
Great, thank you, Lee. And Hanan, you're not bringing a particular innovation, but you're an enabler. But tell us more.
I thought I should pitch 1 minute a nation, right?
Yeah,
that was
go
part
for
of it. So I'll pitch. Israel Innovation Authority is a public entity backed by Israeli government, which is supposed to promote Israeli technologies, companies, startups, academia. We invest around $600 million per year into companies. So we get around 3,000 applications per year, approved between 40 to 50% of them. And we're trying to invest mainly where the private market does not exist. So we invest much less in software, cybersecurity, fintech, but we're focusing on areas like healthcare and climate tech, where we feel that there is a market need, especially in the early stages. In the last couple of years, we invested, there is in Israel 350 companies in these spaces of agri-tech, food tech, water, and we funded around 50% of these companies from really inception. And the other part that we're working on is also advising the government on innovation policy. So trying to remove barriers, trying to change things like regulation that can promote technologies that are needed in Israel, and that's part of our job.
Thank you, Hanan. And Lee, I wanted to come back to you. So it was really interesting hearing your pitch, and it's been a pleasure working with you on this pavilion. Aleph Farms is one of our session partners, and we're trying to bring the cultivated meat here to the COP and address that as a key issue and part of the solutions, right? But what do you think are the key barriers that's preventing us from taking this from sideline to center stage at the COP and even beyond in the global level?
So there's many barriers as a startup. We are already about 5 years in. We're not so young. We're about 140 employees in the company. We've already raised about $120 million. And I say this because we're not that typical very early stage startup. We're already a growing company. But with that said, when we're looking at how we want to build ourselves and grow as a company, we're looking also at the impact that we want to create from our product, and also how we want to grow our company from within, thinking about taking accountability and creating a sustainable and resilient organization. And to that extent, we feel that there is still missing a framework that can support and collect all these young companies that are really trying to create that impact, especially in the ag food sector, and kind of be a home for them to support them in creating things that not only that the product can support on the society, but also thinking a lot about how we can work with inside. And actually, Aleph Farms and INFARM, together with a few other wonderful partners, investors, have created this GATA Alliance. exactly for this this reason, where we want to have that real a home for startups and for companies and tech companies specifically to really be able to grow properly and support that impact that we need and achieve our goals for 2030.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the GATA Alliance, because Joanna was unable to join? To you, Lee.
Oh, okay. So the GATA Alliance, as I said, it's very newly established. And basically, what we're trying to do here, I can give you an example of a very serious challenge that we're dealing with. And each startup has different other challenges that they need to deal with. So we've committed to becoming net zero carbon in 2025, and that means that we're basically building our company from inception as a net zero carbon company. To that extent, we don't have a baseline, okay? So that means that we're not eligible to join initiatives like the Race to Zero, and we're not eligible to join initiatives like Science-Based Targets Initiative, these are both wonderful initiatives, but we're not there because we don't have that baseline. We're not a big corporate that's now starting a process of reduction. We're trying to build with design this kind of concept. Now, to do that comes with many, many challenges, and because of that, we are navigating between all the different methodologies that not all of them are necessary. You implement, sorry, thank you. They're not necessarily you can implement as a startup. And therefore, we want to try to create, this is a global alliance, and we want to try to create some kind of methodology that can support younger companies. Because, for example, ESG reporting is something that's mandatory when you're already a large company, when you already have a lot, when you're commercial, when you have a lot of facilities. And we actually want to start supporting these younger companies to build themselves with that roadmap and that approach of how you can do that with that mindset of thinking, in the end, I'm starting young now, but in the future, we're going to be a big company, hopefully. I mean, that's the goal, but we want to do it and be accountable as we do it.
Thank you so much, Lee. Suds, I want to come back to you because Suds actually opened this whole pavilion and the day was focused on enhancing resilience. You already introduced vertical agriculture. How many of you were actually there here on day one when Suds was speaking? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So there are new people here as well, so they might want to hear a bit more of what you said. What really struck me was you outlined also now that vertical farming is not new anymore. You know, it has arrived, but it hasn't arrived here at the COP. You know, and what is stopping us?
Well, so it's quite telling that I think we are the only vertical farming company at COP, which is already a little bit depressing because you'd hope that there'd be many such companies with the future of food or, you know, present future food in the system. Now, this is just to take a quick step back. This is for, if you're not familiar with it, it's conceptually controlled environment agriculture. So you're controlling all aspects of the weather, of humidity, of carbon, of nutrients, of water that are actually going into the growing of a particular food or a particular plant in a way that is completely indifferent, if you will, to the external environment. And I think that is the specific relevance to COP, that how do you create a climate resilient system or a climate proof system for growing food for as we go into a world of, like I said, between 1.5, 2.5, depending on how optimistic or pessimistic you are. But how do you create enough food and create nutritional and food security? So this is really where we are coming from in terms of helping to move that industry. So just like Lee just talked about the GATA Alliance, I think it happens, these clusters are importantly happening at industry level as well. So just within the vertical farming industry, we are looking to do the same. How do we adopt a set of targets or standards, whether it be the SBTI, whether it be B Corp, as a recently, certified B Corporation, it's helped us become more robust. There are others who are B Corp certified within that industry. Within the cellular meat industry, or cultivated meat industry, there is similar discussions happening. And then we sort of are rising one level above that into the agri-tech industry. How do we create that noise? How do we create that cut through about the future of food in an industry that is so dominated by traditional agriculture? There's nothing wrong with that. That feeds the world. What we're trying to say is that there are going to be better ways to feed the world, and you have to decouple food production from ecosystem destruction. And at this point in time, we fundamentally, our food production and our food production systems are completely destroying the ecosystems as we know it, from climate to nature. And we know that, and we need to find new ways of fixing that. And can the new industries like ours that are being formed, form it on certain levels of purpose, on certain basis of standards, so that they are actually built for purpose and built to do good for both people and planet.
So just to push you a bit further, you know, you've got me convinced, and you've got many others convinced here as well. But I've been sitting in the negotiations as well on agriculture, and it's not coming to these kind of practical solutions, and certainly not vertical agriculture. They're discussing soil management, water, early warning systems. So what's blocking that? Is that because it's new, or what should we do to get these issues also discussed there in the negotiations room?
Absolutely. I think, look, there's nothing wrong with what's happening in that sense. Those are systems that feed people, and that's really important. What is a challenge is that there are farm subsidies that are not necessarily helpful to the planet. And some of those need to be re-looked at and redirected in some ways. There also needs to be a track for future planning done now, because we should not be sitting here 10 years from today in COP, 37, and saying, oh my God, we should have started taking future food more seriously 10 years ago. And that's the whole point, that these are systems and these are methods that will take time to hit the scale we need.
Yeah, thanks, Suds. Jenny, I think that's like a really good quote. Yeah, 10 years from now, we shouldn't have regretted. This should have been the beginning. We shouldn't begin now. Thanks, Suds. So, Hanan, over to you. I mean, we've heard some of the challenges, but also incredible opportunities. But what are you doing as an enabler to address some of these barriers that innovators are facing?
So I think that if we all agree that changing the way we consume food is an important part of fighting the climate change, we really need to face what you said. The amount of financing to private companies is just not enough, right? Most of investors in the world are focusing on other challenges, go into healthcare, which is important, into software, but not enough into the food tech. And we need to find ways in order to make this also into a business, and understanding that there is a disruption happening here, a disruption in a Silicon Valley, right, where people are actually trying to consume differently, and the way they live is different, and create also opportunities, not only problems. And I think the place of a government is crucial. We detected in 2016 that this issue of food security and agriculture is becoming important, and we created 4 laboratories and incubators around Israel in collaboration with companies where we fund them. And they're only focused on investing in really breakthrough ideas who come out of the university. And we had no industry. And now today we are second in the world in the investment in cultured meat globally after the US. We have tens of companies established every year, and we see the benefits of that. And now we also see the private sector coming, but we had to take the risk in the beginning. We had to help, for example, this is not where you can have 2 kids with a computer solve the problems. It comes from academia. And we're actually promoting basic research in universities. We're promoting applied research, so this research will actually become companies. We give the money in the earliest stages possible. We're working on giving laboratories, free laboratories where researchers and companies can work, because it's very expensive to create a real company. We also work on reducing barriers such as regulation, but also human capital. Lee knows we just approved last week the first program that actually will take people from biotech and convert them with a few months of training into the food industry, because there's a lack of human capital that we understand early that is a barrier. So I really think that if we believe in this sector and governments believe in them, they need to think about this from beginning to scale up. We're really happy to see that Netherlands also had a very big $60 million a cultured meat consortium approved last week, and we want to see more nations doing the same. Yeah.
Thank you, Hanan. Suds, you want to
Yeah,
make one?
just a quick one there. I just wanted to knit together something that Sean said right in the scene setting and what Hanan has just raised, and to your question, Dhanush. And this is, Sean spoke about Singapore's 30 by 30 policy, right, in terms of producing food, and it's now written into their national policy. We can see a live example here in terms of how the body, your agency in Israel, is doing it at a national level. The Netherlands is doing it. What is the best way for these countries who have actually adopted this as policy to impact the negotiations, which are effectively national level negotiations, multilateral negotiations? So we should actually understand from these countries as to what's the best way to do that.
Maybe can I just ask Hanan to respond first and then come to you, Lee? Yeah. So that's a question that Suds is asking. How can those national level innovations, how is Israel bringing that to the table here?
I think we have today around 700 representatives who came from Israel. Some of them came from Bas. It's quite close to come from Israel to Sharm el-Sheikh, which has maybe helped bringing a lot of people here. But it's very clearly that as a small nation, even if we all stop breathing now for 3 years, it won't really change the climate world, right? But the only thing that we have to bring to the table, to the world, is innovation, is ideas. And for many years, Israel was leading as a startup nation from our ability to find opportunities in cybersecurity and in fintech and cars, such as Mobileye. But now we think that our global goal in this net zero is promoting innovation and promoting ideas and startups. And this is where we're contributing to this event. I think there's not enough. I understand that last year in COP there was almost no discussions about technologies. Today there's more about it. But in the green zone, I'm not sure how much they're talking about these issues of actually new ideas that are needed to face the climate change. And maybe next year in the Emirates it will be more clear.
Yep. Thanks, Hanan. Lee?
So I'm an innovative company, and as an innovative company, I recognize in the meat sector, I have to recognize that 1.2 billion people rely on their livelihood on the meat sector. In the agri-food sector, 2.5 billion people rely on their livelihood on the agri-food sector. And if I want to implement innovative technologies to support transition our food systems to becoming more resilient, I need the support of a framework where I can think about the social justice as we implement our innovation. And I think that is probably the key of why today we're still not talking enough about the food systems when we get to COP. And that was, for us, this was one of the main drivers for us to be part of creating this Food Systems Pavilion, because we wanted to make sure that we have the food systems in the discussions, but we also need to do it correctly. We need to think also about the environment, but also about the social, and of course also about the economics of it. And I think that's something where I think governments can start supporting us more of how we not only embrace innovation, which obviously I think is definitely a key to support this transition, but obviously it's not the only aspect. It's one of the main tools, but it's not the only tool. And we need to incorporate that, another additional aspect of thinking how we can support. Singapore and Israel are very small countries. We have very small agriculture. We have almost, I think, over 80% of our beef is imported as is anyways. So obviously as we are developing the Israeli market, which is a very small market, it's not so much, I would say, scaring off the livestock farmers. But we need to think about it, and this is something that's very critical for us. At Aleph Farms, we are really working hard to create a just transition. We are putting lots of resources and efforts in it. but we're kind of alone in this. I mean, we started 2 years. We're slowly now getting a little bit more help and more support of people talking about the just transition. But we need this not only as discussions coming from bottom up, we need this from top down. We need frameworks to support collaborations with the traditional, conventional industries together with also the innovators.
Yep. Thanks, Lee. So Sean, I want to come back to you, and I have two questions which I've picked up from here. And firstly, with two different hats. So I also discovered in New York that you've started several companies, startups. So first question, what Lee raised, when you're starting an organization already, how can we take into account the social justice dimension, the environmental dimensions, all of these together as a startup, and from your experience with startups. And the second point was what Hanan talked about, the plan towards the Emirates in COP28, and you've already been thinking about it. And bringing back to what Suds said, we shouldn't look back 10 years later that we missed an opportunity. How do you make sure that future food is at center stage at Emirates? So two questions for you, Sean. No pressure.
No pressure. I mean, a lot of it's happening already. I mean, what you talked about, you both talked about it on the panel around a startup, because it's easy when you're in startup mode. I've been there as an entrepreneur many times. You're just focused on making things work. But actually what's exciting by what's doing, and this is encouraged through that ecosystem thinking, is, okay, as a startup, you're too small to create systems change. So then actually, how do you already start to think of platforms of startups? The fact that you're already putting an alignment of startups involved in this space together into a global alliance that can talk collectively on how all of those startups add up to something very powerful, because individually it's very hard. And you can't build a huge corporate affairs team as the first thing that you do as a startup. So I think that thinking, I think that's quite a difficult challenge for a lot of startups, to actually think, we're a startup, we're doing all of this, but we have to think as a platform right from the beginning. And so what do platforms of startups look like, particularly in countries where those ecosystems don't exist? If you're in Holland or something like that, even with Israel, with the innovation labs that work, with the innovation authority that works well, with the Food Valley in Holland. But if you're in a country where that doesn't exist, then you really have to build that ecosystem approach. I think the other piece is then around, for me, it's very much around tipping points. And how do we go from just capturing those early movers, so early adopters, which is often what a startup is very good at doing, those 1 or 2% of people that go, oh yeah, I'm going to, sort of like lab-based meats, that sounds really interesting. I'm going to adopt that for so how do you get 20 or 25% of a market to adopt that thinking? Not 100%, but how do you jump at tipping point and create that 20%? And what is that strategy, and how do you build that? And I think that's what we now need to do with a lot of this innovation thinking, is how do we very quickly get to that tipping point?
And how do we get that to Emirates? That was the second question. Do you think for COP28, can we get to that tipping point?
I think, so it's interesting because UAE has already said that they would want to make food and food systems as big at COP as energy. I mean, the fact that they're prepared to already drive that's a huge opportunity. They've also said that food systems innovation is going to be critical in that, and they're backing that with their support for AIM for C, Agricultural Innovation Missions for Climate, they're supporting the food innovation hubs. They're putting this very central. So we have an opportunity. So to support that agenda, how far as a collective community, I mean, the reason I love working with the innovation community is they do think in terms of sprints. They're often like, how can we really create an innovation sprint? So we have a sprint here now. What is it that we can actually do feasibly to demonstrate a real shift in 12 months? and what is the power of that unlock. And I've seen those sprints change entire country thinking. And actually Israel, Singapore, these smaller countries, Rwanda in Africa is another one that has this sort of like, yeah, let's really just crowd in and create a surge in sort of innovation sprints. So there's an opportunity there. But then how do we do that in a way that we're aligning towards a common point? So it's not 100 different initiatives in a scatter approach, but 100 different initiatives in a very focused, targeted way. That would be powerful.
Yeah.
Can I add?
I think Suds is waiting, so then Suds,
Just-
quick answer to Sean.
Quick one. So just building on that for one quick point, which is that creating those systems and force systems change is really to get competitors to work together. Because when you're in an innovation space, the important thing is that, like Sean said, no one company is going to change that world. You are going to change it collectively. And that is really quite key for people to recognize. And therefore, if you bring your competitors together, you will move in that one direction rather than in 10 different or 20 different. And you will never create that critical mass and that momentum that you need for that, whatever that tipping point is, 5%, 10%, whatever it might be. But get the competitors together. And that was actually not an easy task, even for us internally, to say we want to work with our competitors. And that was the thinking that we were bringing as an impact team to INFARM, to say we want to work with all the competitors. And then it took a little bit of convincing that this, what we are looking to do, is pre-competitive. It's not giving away the store. It's not giving away your trade secrets. It is about how can you create a market together and then worry about market share later. First worry about market creation.
That's a great quote as well there, Jenny. Worry about market share later, but we worry about market creation first. So, Hanan, yeah, we're doing well.
I'll try to contradict you, although I completely agree. But it's part of a panel. You have to have contradiction. I'm coming from the venture capital side. I worked for 16 years in a few venture capital, and now I moved to the government, and I'm still trying to acknowledge that I'm in the public market. But the VC thought is, and I think it's relevant for us, says, you know, try 100 things, 90 of them will fail. Ooh, what happened? 90 of the companies will fail, 10 will be okay, 9 will be a good return, and 1 will change the world, right? And I think when we are trying now to solve maybe the biggest challenge of our humanity, okay? It's good to have 1,000 ideas. It's good to have more and promote and say, you know what, we don't know which of these ideas will actually be the successful one. We have no idea. I'm investing in 60 companies every month. I have no idea which of them will be the one to change. I do agree, and that's for what you've said, that the entrepreneurs need to know better what are the challenges. Because we're very good, entrepreneurs are very good in finding solutions, but they need to know the challenges that are actually needed in order to solve them. And I see today a gap where maybe here we know what are the challenges the world have, maybe the companies know that, maybe governments, but entrepreneurs are still have no idea. And if we will be able to say, look, these are the 100 challenges in water, energy, nutrition, climate, carbon capture, maybe we can find more entrepreneurs who will actually start companies and actually solve the problem.
So just one, I have a quick question, and I'll come to you, Suds, and then to you, Lee. Yeah, quick question, Hanan. You mentioned your investment strategy for the startups, but what Lee told me earlier on the panel, it was really compelling. You said you're not small, you're 160 people, so you're not a startup. You want to reach scale. So how do you enable those companies?
We gave them the money when they had an idea and a presentation.
But now,
where no one would invest in them, and that's the important part.
But now to get them to the next level.
For them to scale up, I think there's challenges to scale up. One of them is human capital. One of them is how do you take a company from R&D, right? You had a lot of research, then you had a lot of development, and now you want to build a facility or an infrastructure which costs a lot of money. How do we mitigate regulation and other problems? I think that's also a big problem.
I want to answer that. And we're very big promoters of the Israeli Innovation Authority. They were our early funders. We were part of their government incubator. But I do want to say something. Currently, today, all investments are looking at a ROI in a very, very specific way. Very old, by the way. Like, although the whole high-tech industry is only a couple of decades, we're still only looking at about a profitability in one aspect. But we're not looking at the externalities and translating them into actual cash and finance. So, for example, what is the externalities of the impact on the climate? What are the externalities of the impact on public health, on biodiversity, on food security? If we would take all of those and translate them to some kind of financial methodology, then the way we would look at startups and who's really going to change the world would be completely different. And I think that would also allow us as startups to understand how to push forward in the better way.
Maybe here I have to pitch Sean on that part, because let's say for companies who are scaling up, we cannot invest $200 million in scaling up, right? So then we need the private market. The problem is the banks, the insurers, the big players are reluctant to come into these spaces because it's long, because it's maybe less sexy. And we started a program, and Professor Bareket talked about it yesterday. We gave 40% of protection layer for institutional investor if they lose. So, for example, they need $100 million. If they succeed, we're very happy for them. If they lose, then up to 40% of their losses will be covered by the government, especially in the climate areas and food tech. So maybe that's something that needs to be checked out on a global level.
Sorry, we are running out of time. We have 4 minutes. So, Suds, quick point
just
by you.
Just quick one, related to what Hanan said earlier, and I want to just build a little bit in that connection to what Lee said. There's one big delta between what investments look like at a venture capital moment 10 years or 5 years ago even, and today, and that is purpose. And there was no concept of purpose-built companies. When I was an entrepreneur 15 years ago, that never even entered the equation. And today, that is a real thing. An Aleph or an INFARM or several others, or even the 5,000 B corporations that exist, all have a fundamental purpose which goes beyond that single bottom line to the triple bottom line. And I think that that is a major delta that we need to factor in as we look at future of food and innovation.
Thanks, Suds. We probably have like 2 minutes left, or 3 minutes, but I wanted to give each of you a closing word. So what I'm going to suggest is that if you can give your closing word in a size of a tweet. So Jenny can also use it and tweet, and the other people who are here. So 240 characters to sum up.
I think I can sum up in one word, entrepreneurship. That's what we need.
Perfect, thanks. Thank you. Lee?
So first of all, I'm really excited to hear what Sean had to say about the fact of COP28 and putting food and ag in the center of the discussions for climate. For me, that's critical, and understanding that innovation has a real significant part of this, and that we're very excited to be part of this, and we want to continue and bring in additional innovators to come and support us, and we want to create this GATA Alliance to be a home for all of these companies.
Thanks, Lee. Suds?
Yeah, create partnerships to create momentum.
Suds, you gave like 4 catchy tweets in one session. It's amazing. Yeah. Sean, closing word.
I want one of them to be mine.
No, so, I mean, what we need is a surge in innovation to respond to net zero, nature positive, resilient food systems.
Surge of innovation for net zero, nature positive innovations. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for joining also the panel. It was really nice that you started us and joined us. So I have like 30 seconds to summarize, and I'll just say, like, I've been doing policy engagement for the last 10, 12 years. But since this year, I also became a startup founder. Clim-Eat is also a startup, so we're just 1 year old. So I identify with several of those startup pains and barriers and challenges. But one of the most exciting things in this first year has been, as a startup, we are able to work with other new innovators like Aleph Farms, like INFARM, and many others. And this has been the exciting space, because I always see the new ideas coming in, which was not coming into the previous hats that I was wearing as a policy advisor or anything. So this is the exciting space, and I really look forward to getting that from the sideline to the center stage, working with all of you on that surge in nature positive innovation. Thank you.
I have maybe one tweet.
One more tweet.
Maybe it will work. I think
Go for it.
COP29 needs to be in Silicon Valley.
Amazing. Great.
For all of those that have any influence on the negotiating space at all, since I know some of you have an indirect influence, if we can get the word food systems into this negotiation, that would be huge. Beyond food security, into food systems. That would be huge this year, unbelievably big.